We had the question right now if I should leave the meeting. No, I'm glad to be here. We are glad to be here and talk about narrative organizations. And we are very curious on the discussion afterwards. And Gianluca has great questions we got to see in advance. So it will be really a good interview, I guess. But before we start with that interview, I would like to give a very short impulse with 2 or 3 slides. What is a narrative approach to organizations? So perhaps you can follow me on the slide here. Actually, the word storytelling is very, very closely associated to corporate communication, as Gianluca said in the beginning. It's a very powerful instrument for communication in organizations. It's a bit like this. Oh, sorry, could you mute, because I have a very strong echo. So everybody please go mute. Thank you. It's a bit like, it's still very echo. Well, I just go on. Oh, now it's better.
I think it's Laura.
How do you know?
Because there's not the muting symbol.
Oh, but now it's better. Thank you. Whatever changed, that's good now. Storytelling is a bit like this picture on the left-hand side of the slide. It's very prominent associated with corporate communication. But if you have a broader look at these 2 phases, you might discover much, much more when you work with stories than just the corporate communication part. So there are many more faces to see in this tree when you work with narratives, with stories in organizations. And this is because stories are the central form of communication for us human beings. It's everywhere and always around us to talk in stories. And also organizations are basically made out of stories. And the critical point is it's always like that, regardless if the organizations know about this phenomenon or not. So you have so many stories on the floors, in the kitchen, when people fetch their coffees, but also not told stories that still determine behavior and perception and the mood of people. And so organizations are basically narrative systems. And the power of stories is there, regardless if organizations know that or not. And there are some dimensions in organizations that are especially powerful with concerning stories. So imagine an organization like an anthill. You don't see much. It's just an hill in the woods, and you don't see about the secret life in this anthill. You don't see the caves, the tunnels, the different levels of life, the different animals that crawl and work and make the tunnels and bridges in there. And so it's a bit like an organization. On the first glance, everything looks structured. But if you have a second glance, you see those many invisible layers of organizations, especially in these narrative dimensions. This is very, very crucial. So every organization has stories about who are we? What is our identity? Every organization has many, many stories about why are we coming to work? So the employees tell themselves and each other sense-making stories. And of course, all the value system, why are we working like we are working? These are also very much constructed via stories. And last but not least, the knowledge of the organization is also transported via stories. When people are very experienced, they talk to each other, always in narrative structures, which will be more closely discussed later. But these fields are really made out of stories. So this is actually when we talk about narrative organizations, we talk about that organizations are storytelling systems. This might be enough for now, for the beginning. And I think I just stop sharing and we go into the interview. Gianluca, is that okay? Good. So let's go back to you and the Zoom.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So before jumping into the book contents, let me start this interview with a more general question related to your profession and storytelling also, because you work, you and Michael, you work as a professional in the field of narrative organization for more than 20 years, okay? And in your book, you wrote you were the first to bring storytelling to German companies 20 years ago. So my first question is, how was the panorama at that time? I mean, the panorama related to storytelling, because nowadays storytelling is a buzzword, but at that time, I think it wasn't. So how was the panorama at that time? And how was the attitude of the companies toward storytelling, so toward a narrative approach? This is my first question.
Okay, thank you. We both started in that time, at the same time, Christina with Narata and I with some colleagues. End of the 90s, we started both to work with storytelling, but we didn't know each other. We were competitors, if you want so, to bring that word storytelling into German companies. And the first reaction was bewilderment. Storytelling? What shall we do with storytelling? We are serious engineers and we're doing serious work. We don't want to tell fairy tales. But more and more, there has been some open-minded managers and leaders who saw the necessity to do something new. And so we found our the first companies who wanted to work with us. I think it was the same thing with you, Christina, that it was strange for the companies, but they were curious as well. And little by little, storytelling became established more and more in Germany. And I think I don't know that, but I think it will be in other countries the same thing with this word, except of English-speaking countries. Do you have to add something, Christina? Yeah.
In English-speaking countries, storytelling is also getting more and more prominent, but it's more called storywork or I don't know, but storytelling is actually just a translation of telling stories. But I think the professional work with stories is also getting more and more prominent in the English-speaking countries, yes. Mm-hmm.
But today the situation is changed. So because we were discussing in this morning session that storytelling is a buzzword. Nowadays, we find storytelling in every field, in many different, also professional fields. So my second question is, do you think that this popularization of storytelling makes the work of professionals like you easier or more difficult, at least in your experience?
I think it's both. So it's much easier to get into discussion with managers and with leadership people because they know, storytelling, I've heard already. Yeah, that's a very powerful tool for corporate communication. But this is also the problem because it's the definition of storytelling still is or the understanding of storytelling still is very narrow and very often false. People think that you as a storyteller can somehow create the most convincing story on earth and everything will change. So this is the image we sometimes are confronted with, which of course is nonsense because nobody can create the story and definitely not externals like us because we're not part of the system. So we can advise, we can help, we can give them tools how to listen to their own stories and how to create good stories out of their stories. So it's both. It's easier to get into a discussion with people because it's a buzzword and it needs description and clearing and discussion what exactly is needed and what we can offer as professionals.
And there's often you hear that something is called a story, but it's only an expression of an emotion, or it's only a metaphor. This is not a story; it's a metaphor. But there's so many things are called stories, which are not stories.
Yes, in this regard, about the correct use of the terms, of the categories. In the intermezzo chapter, that is one of your book chapter, that I found in which I found one of the clearest and well explained definition of story that I used in this morning. You mentioned that you described the difference between story and narrative. We tend to use these two terms in the same way, but I think there is a difference. So my question is, could you explain the difference between narrative and story from a corporate point of view?
Yeah. Okay. I think in our way of speaking, narrative is the basic structure of a story. The basic structure Aristotle knew when he said every story has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. Every story has a beginning. A is lonely, and it has a middle in which a transformation or a change is going on. A falls in love with B, and the ending where the change is executed, B is happy, A is happy. And this basic structure is a narrative. It is the basic narrative of every love story. And if I tell a love story about concrete people, John is lonely and John falls in love, then it is a story. A story is about concrete characters, concrete persons, concrete people. I want to tell, and the narrative is the basic structure lying under all these stories. And in corporate, speaking in corporate storytelling, it could be the basic narrative of all stories a company wants to tell about their image, for instance, or about their field of work. And the concrete stories are then the stories about this product, that action, that process, and so on.
So we would say the narrative is the structure. The story is the single story that I'm going to tell.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And regarding the narrative approach, because we usually tend, or general conversation maybe is very frequent to associate the storytelling only to the external communication of companies. But I think reading your books, you understand, you can really understand how important could be storytelling for organizations in terms of rethinking new strategies or new organizations. So why is storytelling is not merely a communication method for external corporate communication, but it is important for also internal organizations?
So if you understand it broadly than just telling stories, to work with stories, then you also have the part of listening to stories and the part of creating stories together and so on. And the first thing we always do in organizations is to use different methods for story listening. So we collect the stories to get to know these basic narratives an organization tells about itself. For example, if you have an organization where a change is intended from leadership, then we go and listen to people. What are their narratives, what there are experiences regarding change. And very often people are very reluctant to changes. They say, I don't want to have any more changes. We had so many changes. No, thanks. This is the most obvious answer, but we listen to the stories and their experiences and find out, for example, that they had various projects that never ended, various attempts to make change in the last 20 years that never were fruitful. So people made the experience, change doesn't really take place at our place, and it's worst energy to engage in change projects. So, and story listening is this part where I get to know the organization and understand the deeper narratives people make and tell each other, subconscious, that determine how they think and how they act towards leadership, towards branding, towards recruiting, towards whatever. So knowing the organization very well through story listening helps enormously to create the storytelling part, to find those stories that can resonate to the people, that can reach them, you know. So this is the second. It's a broader view on working with storage, where the first step is to listen to the stories that already exist.
Thank you. So while we are continuing the interview, please share your questions if you have questions in the chat. And I'm going to ask the question to Michael and Christine. Another interesting aspect of your book is the fact that you wrote to guarantee successful storytelling strategies, it is necessary to involve into the narrative processes the company employees. So in the storytelling strategies, it's not only necessary to involve the communication managers, okay, this is normal, but also company employees. So could you explain how usually do you involve them and what are the results of their participation into the storytelling processes?
Yes, we do it by story listening projects, as Christine said before. That does mean we execute narrative interviews with the employees, and the narrative interview is we don't ask questions, but we only set impulses to tell. Tell me from the first day you started to work in this company till nowadays, what did happen, and what you remember, and or we have yeah, okay. Let's remain at that narrative interviews. Last week, Christine and I were at a chemical firm, and we had 17 narrative interviews. They are recorded, and we don't ask any questions because it's very interesting what doesn't shine up in these narrative interviews. We don't ask how can you tell us a story with your customers, because it's interesting that if, and we experience that, if the word customer doesn't shine up in the interviews at all, because that are stories then of a company who is completely occupied with itself. And these interviews are recorded and typed, transcripted, and then we analyze the stories and their structures, and not the individual stories, but what is similar in all these stories, what are experiences or structures of telling or metaphors or meanings which are shining up in all these stories. And so we learn about the hidden part, the inside of the anthill, as Christine showed in the beginning, what are the mindsets in the company? What are the beliefs in the company? What are the hidden rules which the employees act after them, and so on. And what was the question?
The following question is, I think there is also in the chat. What are, in your opinion, the characteristic that a corporate storyteller should have to be a good corporate storyteller?
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I think it might be redundant now to say he must be good in listening, but that's actually really the most important message we have when we talk about narrative organizations and about narratively intelligent organizations, because normally you don't really listen, and you create quite a lot, and you are quite active also as a storytelling chief officer. You define your job. You're good at your job when you create many stories and make much noise, so to say, and you're not so good if you just sit still and do nothing but listening. So this is a kind of mental shift we need in the storytelling community, that it's so essential to get to know the stories that are already told without any intervention from the chief storytelling officer. First of all, don't make something new upon that what is there, but first of all, collect and learn what are the hidden treasures to heave in this organization. This is the most important competency, and it's very difficult to learn because all our professions are socialized that we are good when we perform. So and listening isn't really, you don't see that you perform, it's just a very humble way of being, and this is the mindset shift what needs it. Most important, listening. Second thing, perhaps, to be creative and to find the right words, but this is actually the communications competence that many already have that work in this field. Michael, did you want to add something?
Yeah, one thing that the story must be interesting. And for a story to be interesting, there has to have a conflict in the middle, or a challenge, or something like that. For example, my love story example from before, if John falls in love with Mary, and then he asks Mary, "Hey Mary, do you want to marry me?" And Mary says, "Okay, let's do." And then they marry. That is a boring love story. But if there are conflicts in the beginning, and Mary thinks that John is a douchebag, and she doesn't love him at all, and then John does everything to fall in love with her, then it becomes an interesting love story. And I think very often in companies, so-called success stories are very boring stories, because companies tell stories, oh, at the beginning we were very successful, and then we became more and more successful, and today we are so successful, and tomorrow we will be so successful. That's not a good story. It's a very, 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 very boring story. And so look for the conflict, for the challenge, if you want to tell stories, good corporate stories. And before, listen, of course, listen.
It seems a paradox that a fundamental skill for a storyteller is not to be able to tell, but to be able to listen. To be silent instead of telling stories. It's very interesting, and also the fact that it sometimes, also in my experience, companies tend to they want just to tell successes and not problems or obstacles that are very useful to make people to get people to identify yourself in the story, because a story of a sequence of success, just success, is not what happens in the everyday life. That is full of also problems.
Or if we have a success, then I want to hear the story about how was fought for it. If I tell the story, and then at last evening, I invented a corona vaccine. It's a boring story, but if I tell the story, how that years of research was necessary, and there were a lot of fallbacks and problems and challenges we had to obstacles we had to override for getting this vaccine at the end. Then their success is higher than a success that is, oh, we were so successful, told without every obstacles and challenges.
There are other questions from the audience. Do you have comments or something else?
Maybe, Gianluca, if I can.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to ask about, let's say, the dangers or, how can I say, ethical boundaries of storytelling. I mean, I think it's storytelling. We said it's a very powerful tool, but I suppose it can be used also to how can I put it? I mean, also telling lies or enhancing the truth or directioning the truth toward something that is not really real or it's something bad, inherently bad. So how do you deal with these ethical boundaries? That's my first question. Another curiosity I have is what's the difference, if there is any, between storytelling for organization linked to a product or a service, so basically a company, an enterprise, and organization that are more focused toward, for example, social action, maybe an association or, I don't know, political party or something like that.
So perhaps going to the first part of your questions, to the ethical boundaries, I would say working with stories is like having a knife in your hands. It's an instrument, and you can kill somebody or you can spread butter on your bread. So it's always not it's not the knife isn't guilty for its power. It's the intention I use it with. So this might be the first part of this ethical discussion that, of course, working with stories is a powerful intervention, and it depends on your motives. But on the deeper layer, I can answer that, for example, when you make these narrative interviews with the chemical employees or with any other members of any organization, we have a very, very strict anonymization procedure. So they really can give, we have a contract with them that no word, no name, nothing of their interviews is ever given to the leaders. We just analyze the general structures out of all interviews, but you never ever can detect, it was Mr. A or Mrs. B who told something. This is what we really make written down in a contract with each of our interviewees. So this gives very much safety and security for everybody who works with us. And perhaps an even more important facet is that working with stories in our settings, this is often with change and strategy development in companies. It's very important to have participatory elements in your structure of how to accompany the company into future. So we really think about we think hard about how can we involve many employees in our change story. And this is also something very important for the ethical part of this thing, because they always are involved in inventing their own story with us together. It's not the external storytellers who come and listen and then they say, hey, we have the story for you. like it might be in branding and product development. It's more an ongoing process where many people are involved. And this is part of the change structure. So this is the first part, but Michael, would you like to answer the second part? What's the difference between branding and corporate storytelling? As far as I remember the second part, was it this question, Alessio?
Yes, the difference between storytelling in organization that are geared toward profits, let's say, and non-profit organization.
A non-profit.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
From the pure storytelling, it's the same because a story is a story, but the topics of the storytelling are different. If I tell about, if I do corporate storytelling, then the image of the company has to be transported with the stories or communicated with the stories. And if you have a non-profit organization, we did last winter, we did develop storytelling for a bird watch organization, but they as well wanted to tell about the image of for the NGO, and I think it's always from the storytelling isn't different. The content of the storytelling is different. Whether I tell about our products as BMW and our cars, stories about cars, or whether I tell stories about birds and watching birds and saving the environment and things like that. This is always a question of the content, but the structures of the stories are the same. Mainly the same.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I have another question. Where do you find the stories to tell? I mean, where the raw material for developing of a story, you know, through the interview process, you collect information then that you then decide to transform in a story. Where do you find the material for developing a corporate story?
I would, for example, very often we make story listening workshops. So you just collect many people out of different areas of the organization, or you take one department, whatever is the aim, and then you just ask them one question, like, for example, what is a most typical situation you remember regarding working with your customers, or what is the most typical memory that comes into your mind when you think about collaboration between different departments? And then people think a while alone or in two with each other, help to find each other, to find this memory. And then we just listen to them again and make a round where everybody tells his or her memory. And then then we just ask for, what's the title of this story you just told if we would make a film out of it? And so we have titles of these stories, and we cluster them on a whiteboard. And you can afterwards work very nicely together with the people to cluster similar stories, or to find out we have totally different stories. So you can analyze together with the people. As I said right now with Alessio, it's so important to find tools that make participation necessary and normal, because then the story creates itself. And then people and we are together developing this core material of the story, and then you can give it to a storyteller in the company, or we make it and make a proposition, and people take this proposal and work with it again in the next workshop. So it's a combination from story listening, workshop architecture, and making suggestions that are worked from the people themselves.
And in the same way, you can as well find stories for marketing and for that you can use for marketing or for corporate storytelling, external corporate storytelling, because you will be surprised how many stories sleep in the minds of the employees And how many stories about customers, for instance, sleep in the minds of salespeople? Do such a workshop, like Christine said, with salespeople, you will be overflooded with stories that you can use for external and internal storytelling.
And the cool thing is, they are authentical. They are not invented. So they have a resonance to the system and to the people, and which is much safer than inventing something on our own as storytellers, to rely on the basic stories we detect in the system, in the organization.
Okay. And what are the advantages for companies in using a narrative approach? Concrete advantages, because I think company asks to concrete impact when they decide to invest, in projects, or and if you can you share with us also some example taken from your experience?
So it's always very difficult. We have, of course, this question: how much do we save when we work with you and with storytelling and so on? And you cannot really measure it in money, but you can make it visible with the people's motivation. So people are normally more motivated to work in their field. They're not as often sick or ill or absent when we have a storytelling project, because they begin to re-identify themselves with their work more than when you just work with old management. And old management means, in this case, and as an example, in this chemical industry, we were just, Michael just told, with the 17 people we interviewed last week, we were called to this chemical industry plant because they have a department. They have a department out of 65 people, and this department is closed in itself. So new employees are mobbed out. Every advice or change or other things that come from the leadership is just ignored. So these 65 people are somehow not any longer interacting with the other parts of the system and the clients and the customers and everybody. And this is, of course, fatal, because they need to go into change projects. They need to take younger employees and show them how the machines work, because the younger employees don't know how to handle this chemical plant. But the older employees, they don't say anything. They are just silent and muted. And so our assignment was to find out what is happening there. Why are they so unwilling to cooperate? And we don't have the answers yet. We just had the interviews, and we might have first assumptions that it's about appreciation, about listening to each other. It's many psychological things are popping up in the interviews, but we will have a deeper analysis next week. But so we can answer right now, the management, we can answer right now. We will have to make some changes with all the people concerning communication. How do you communicate with each other? What is about giving appraisal and giving feedback? And this is already something which is really measurable in how people begin to talk to each other differently after the interview, because they are first time they had time to talk. And this is the first intervention, which is very important in change, that you begin to give space for telling their own story. But this is that's not measurable in euro. So it's a very soft answer, so to say, not really hard in euro or money. But luckily it convinces the management and leadership often, because otherwise we wouldn't have work out there. Michael, do you have to add something to the measurable question? It's not easy to answer.
Yeah, I think it's not measurable, but it has advantages that are you can see that as you said, the employees are more motivated for their daily work. They are more motivated for joining projects, going the extra mile, and things like that. But as well, being in a company where nobody is motivated, innovation will not happen. There will always be the old stuff. And I think for the whole company to know the stories of the employees does mean to know the companies itself. It's a little bit, they have to look into the anthill and see how our employees think, feel, and so on. And that means that strategic projects and change project can be much more successful, because I do not dig in the anthill without a plan, but I can dig in it with a plan.
Yeah. So storytelling as a way to facilitate interactions inside the companies. Yes. Do you have questions? There are questions from the audience.
Yes, I have questions, but mine is more curiosity and is more a forecast, I would like to say. I'm really curious to know your opinion about this. Is related to the pandemic situation that we have. So do you think that this situation will impact the future of the corporate storytelling? And if the answer is yes, I would like to know your opinion about it. So in which way this situation will change the way to do corporate storytelling? Thank you.
So the question about the future are always difficult
I know.
to answer.
It's more an opinion. It is a forecast, but just to have an idea, since you have so many years on your back, so it's interesting to know.
Yeah, I might try and answer, because I made an observation in the last months. When I look into social media, and of course we have many networks, and we are invited to talk in different congresses, also in Zoom and online. And what I observed is that in the last 8 months, you have so many more formats, online formats, where it's about storytelling, not really corporate storytelling, but sharing experiences as a person. So there is a huge need, there's a desire in each of us to connect and to share your experiences out of this pandemic situation. And it's, well, we are not all private individuals in Zoom, we are all somewhere working. So also the corporate field will react. And I think this desire to share experience and to connect more than before in a form, well, we connected before as well, but it was easier because we just could hug each other or go for a beer. But now you need more formalized stages for connecting, and this will go into corporate field as well. I'm quite sure of that corporate, those companies that are fast in understanding, hey, we need to make stages for our employees to talk to each other, and we need to make storytelling rooms where they can tell their stories about their work to the outside world. They will be more successful than those that stay to before Corona. That is my forecast, so to say.
Thank you. I know it's a difficult question, but thank you. I really appreciate your answer.
Thank you.
And maybe in another field of corporate storytelling, these are future stories. What does a company tell about its own future and the future of the products? And there in the past, these stories were very very determined. We will do this and that, and so it will be better for the world, and things like that. And I think what we all have learned in the Corona time is that it's difficult to forecast the future, and that we have to be careful in telling future stories. And maybe it will be more experimental stories which are told in the future about the future in the future, and that's so determined stories. It will be like that, and that would be a good thing. Not so much about goals, but more about ways to reach something.
Thank you. So we have another question from Francesco. Are internal storytelling and external storytelling processes that have to proceed together, or can they travel on parallel channels, or can they travel on parallel channels? If you have to give an order, do you consider internal or external storytelling more important?
Michael, what's about identity at this point? I could share the identity slide for that. No?
Yeah.
Yes, Michael?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm asking Michael because...
okay.
No,
no?
I think I didn't understand the question.
If it's if we can make a distinction between internal and external storytelling, and if we need to decide which is more important. That's what I heard.
Okay.
Is that right?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you define external storytelling and internal storytelling? Not that we talk about different things, Francesco. Just a few words more. What is your definition of that?
I was thinking about the activity that you have done internally into the organization, and so the storytelling with, for example, the employee, etc., or the external storytelling, and so the storytelling versus clients and whatever.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I wasn't so clear in the question.
Oh no, it's just that we have different mental images of this field. So yeah.
And
Michael,
as well is the question about the order. I imagine that there is not a more important storytelling, but just understand which, in your opinion, is we should consider prevalent.
That I think it's for as well for Michael than for me quite difficult to answer, because for us it's not an either or, it's an both at the same time. Perhaps I can share a slide which might help to make it more visible what would we think, why I say it's both. That's the wrong slide, I'm sorry. This one I want to share. If you think about this anthill, for us those 4 fields of working are always the same important as the other 3, each of them, and you cannot do one of them alone. So it wouldn't help to make story listening alone, which could be something like internal storytelling, making workshops and collecting stories and finding the core narratives. This is all those things and workshop settings and narrative interview and stuff we call story listening. So there are many methods and tools behind story listening, which are internally or which are made with the customers. Then it's external, but it's the same, has the same importance than trying to find ways to change the story, the memories and the experiences of people, so that they have some new things to tell. You know, this is what we call story doing, that people in the company begin to share new stories because they made new experiences. So the story doing field would be if they never ever say yes to any changes, like the employees in this chemical plant, and when they are so muted and don't talk any longer, they need to make new experiences that give something new to them, and then they tell different stories. And this is the field of how can we make new stories internally. And then the story co-creation is this participatory moment where we try to involve many people in all actions of storytelling, because the more people are involved, the more it will work and it will function and will get viral, so to say, like in the social media. And storytelling finally is talking about all these things and spreading the word and making it even more visible with all means of communication internally and externally. So, you know, this is why both of us, I suppose Michael as well, cannot really say this is more important than that, because it needs all four facets of looking and of finding the right method in the field. And then you can look into the anthill, so to say. Did you want to add something, Michael?
And I think the classical, if you tell stories externally about how great our company is, but all employees know we are a shithouse of company, then there's something doesn't fit together. And companies talk in social media and in the internet as well. You cannot tell stories externally which are not true internally as well. I think, and so both, like Christina said, both is has the same importance.
I just discovered the question in the chat from this is Lava. No?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Did we answer your question, Francesco?
Yeah,
Somehow.
thanks. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so you're welcome.
We have another question related to the use of storytelling for internal organization. So can you give an example from Desislava Dimitrova? Can you give example for the best internal storytelling channels approach?
Yeah, well, this is now very provocant from me. Let the employees tell their stories. This is the most effective channel you ever can use. So I know you mean a different thing, but this is our message. It's not about creating and designing stories and using some channels. It's about involving employees and working with their stories. And so if you manage that they tell each other the stories, how great the new product is, then you made a really brilliant job as a chief storytelling officer. I know it's not what you might expect as answer, but this is our approach, which really proves to work more and more in the companies.
Okay, thank you. Another important question, I think, considering that this is a learning activity in the context of a EU project, is what is your suggestion to a young person or also a professional who would like to upskill through the storytelling skills for not becoming an expert, but becoming a more professional in the using of storytelling techniques?
The easy answer would be join our learning program. We have an English one starting next year as well.
Online actually.
Online, yeah. But I think again and again, story listening. Every writer and every filmmaker will tell you, if you ask him how big can I become a good writer, novel writer, or a good screenplay writer, everybody will say, watch as many films as you can get, and read as many novels as you can read. That's the best education for becoming a good storyteller. And I think it's the same here as well. See the films, the stories companies tell, think about them, analyze them, what is good with them, what is bad with them, and then get your own way of storytelling. But you can shorten this process with our education program.
Yeah.
Sorry for that.
No, I might have an additional answer for that, because I often observe when I'm working with young people, and there also was the same for myself, that you often are confronted with a very, very weird situation. The people come, even now they come to us and say some things like, "Oh, you know, Christine, we need a good story. Our people are so slow in working. We need to motivate them newly. Please give us a good change story." Or our product isn't sold very well. We need a good branding story. Please make that forward for us. And actually, the mental image, the assumption of those people who come with these assignments is, as we had before with Alessio and the ethical thing, that storytelling is such a sharp knife that it can change the attitude of clients, of customers, of employees, which is totally nonsense. Nothing can change their attitude, their mental pictures, but only one thing: new experiences they make. Only new experiences make changes in consumption behavior, in going, in liking to go to work in the morning or whatever. So it's nonsense to believe in stories as such a powerful tool that you can really manipulate the mental image and how the people look at products or their own company. And this is what is difficult for young storytelling people in the companies or as a consultant, because you very easily are totally at your ends, because you cannot really fulfill such an assignment. You need to be so clear to say, sorry, I cannot take this assignment because I'm not somebody with what is Zauber. I cannot make magic. I cannot make some new world out of my story. I just can help you to find the right words to connect to your people and to your customers. That's very important for the storytelling work, to be also there humble what storytelling can reach and can use for people.
Could you give us information about your educational program, online educational program, because maybe someone could be interested in it. So if you want to share the slide related
Yes.
to it.
Very, very, of course, yeah. So actually we have two announcements to make. Perhaps this might also interest one or two of you. We make a story camp in autumn this year next to Berlin. It's international, so it will be in English. And there are people from Israel and South Africa and New Zealand. Well, there were people. We don't know how it is with Corona, if they can travel in. Right now, it's more Austria, Switzerland, and Germany that are already registered. So we don't know if it will be really so international as it was. But it's like a bar camp. Everybody comes and we design in the morning together story co-creation, what sessions are made, who wants to introduce a narrative tool, who wants to learn about storytelling tools, and who has some new idea to discuss about. So it's really a very open format, and about 40 people, it's exactly 40 people, not more. And it's a very, very great format, because you really can discuss and work and try out things. So this is the first thing I would like to recommend, that you have a look at the homepage beyondstorytelling.com. It's a nice community of story worker, from branding, from change, from coaching, everything. It's very interdisciplinary. And the second thing, what Gianluca just mentioned, is this further education program. So when you follow this link, you find an agenda. It's 11 sessions, each 2 hours.
4 hours.
4 hours. Is it always 4 hours, or is it sometimes 4 hours, sometimes 2 hours? It's I'm right now I'm a bit lost with the.
They are always 4 hours. Only the last one is 2 hours.
It's only 2. Yeah, thank you. So it's over the whole year, next year, in English, and it's online. So this is actually this further education about the contents of the book, what we talked about, and actually the goal of the further education program is to help people to be able to be a consulting person that works with narrative tools. So it's about storytelling, story listening, story doing, story co-creation, and how you really can design change and strategy and storytelling, branding, communication with very different narrative methods, not only the storytelling methods, but also the other fields. So this is the advertisement block. Thank you, Gianluca, for this opportunity to share. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we are getting to the end of this presentation. I don't know if there are other questions. The chat. So I just a last question before ending. Could you suggest to the audience 2 books that have been fundamental in your training as a storytelling professionals, so that people could read for improving storytelling skills?
Yeah, I think one fundamental book is Joseph Campbell, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. I think most of you will know the hero's journey as a story model coming from the from myths, and Joseph Campbell was a researcher who compared stories from all countries, from the ancient Greek to Romans to Indians to Chinese and so on, and he found always the same story structure, the hero's journey, and we use this hero's journey in many fields in companies for planning projects, but as well for building stories which follow this principle of a hero's journey. That would be a very good book. And Joseph Campbell was a researcher, a scholar. Sometimes his book is not so easy to read, but there's a Hollywood guy, Christopher Vogler, The Writer's Journey, who made it more digestible for everyday's reading, this hero's journey.
I wrote the name in the chat.
Shall I write it?
Okay.
Okay.
I just we have 4 actually, but what Michael just said is the second of this, Joseph Campbell, The Hero. I just copied it in the chat, all of them. We would suggest. So
yes, exactly. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So the other ones we didn't really talk about right now, and it's of course narrative therapy, and they are free, but the Campbell one is the one Michael just mentioned. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for this book presentation. So thank you to Michael and Christine and to all participants for this interesting, very interesting afternoon session. The next learning activity in the context of storylines will be on Wednesday at 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. And we are going to focus on the storytelling tools, some practical tools for improving storytelling skills. So thank you very much, and see you on Wednesday.
Thank you for your time and for listening and asking so many cool questions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.